Hi, and welcome to this AI video on the Community Toolkit.vector data release of 1.0. You might think, what in the world is that? So, in order to better understand this, we need to clear our confusion and see a little history about uh, what the vector store story have been in the Microsoft space in C#. So, the timeline of being able to use RAG, because vector stores is equal to RAG. In this video, I'm not going to go into what RAG is. I have videos directed on that, and also how to use them in 18 framework, but more how do we actually put our data into a vector store so we can use it for RAG. So back in the day, the only real story Microsoft had with AI was semantic kernel. And that was good, but it didn't really do any RAG because there was no RAG story for Microsoft at that point. So, as always, what happened when we were back in the semantic kernel made their own system in order to do vector data. It was a very crude system that we could put some data into various vector stores, SQL Server, Azure AI Search, SQLite, and so on. And it was okay. I tried it out back in the day, and while it worked, it was a bit clunky to work with. So what happened was that the semantic kernel team saw that this was something we needed in more general terms. And at the same time, where Microsoft Extensions AI were pushed, there was also something called MEVD. They didn't go too much into big fanfare about it, but it was Microsoft Extensions vector data. And the difference between Microsoft Extension AI and Microsoft Extension vector data is that the vector data was only an abstract implementation, meaning it didn't implement any, but it just gave the raw interfaces and abstract methods to do a good vector data story. The spec came up from the semantic kernel team, and they were also the ones who made the first connectors. So inside the semantic kernel repo, Microsoft semantic kernel.connectors .SQL Server, Azure AI Search, and so on. So we were happy. We now had semantic kernel. We had a more abstract thing that only semantic kernel used, but at least there was a standard. So it could live for the future. And we had the implementations. Later on, as you all know, in October 2025, we got Microsoft Agent Framework. And when we got that and looked into the repo of Microsoft Agent Framework, we saw no RAG story, no vector data story. And it made sense because they had made this Microsoft Extension vector data abstract class, but we ended up not having anything new. So we ended up sitting and migrating all our code to Microsoft Agent Framework, except our RAG, because it was still in semantic kernel. While it wasn't really there, it was there, the code was there, the implementation of the SQL Server, the SQLite, the Azure AI, and so on was there, and they were in a namespace Microsoft semantic kernel. But beyond that, it didn't really fit that repo. And that was just confusing because we wanted to migrate to Agent Framework, but it was not everything we could migrate, at least in namespace. There was no real drawbacks to it other than it was a strange name. And this is what this video is about, because it has finally been resolved now, in that the code that was in the semantic kernel repo have now been migrated over to the Community Toolkit vector data. And Doing so is a fairly simple process, and I will show you that there's actually not much to it in order to switch to this. This now also being deprecated as a NuGet package, or the various NuGet packages. So now we have this new one, and Community Toolkit, if you don't know, is a repo up in, or an owner up in GitHub that Microsoft own and have all the less official but still Microsoft backed systems. So, for example, for vector data here. So the official implementation abstract, this is how you implement it, is here, while we have the data. I'm a bit surprised that it went up in Community Toolkit and not inside the Microsoft extensions, but they chose that. Not really much of a problem for us. Let's see what this means and how to migrate to it now that we know. So we have for a long time have Microsoft extensions vector data abstractions. You can see it's all the way back from 2024, and it has been moved up and it lives in the Microsoft extensions repo, as we can see in here. But now we have these new packages, community toolkit.vectordata.something. And these are the different vector data that we have: SQL Server, Cosmos, Azure AI Search, and so on and so forth. We have 9 of them. We also had 9 of them in Semantic Kernel. And if we look at them, of course, they have a dependency on the vector data abstractions. So, of course, they work exactly the same. So how do we go about moving to these? So I made a small little program here, community toolkit.vectordata, but I'm still using semantic kernel here. In this case, the SQL vector. And just for reference, the code is just taking some data, in this case, a null space, set up data. It's making the embedding generator, so we can hook that up to the vector store. We make the vector store, in this case of type SQL vector store, with the connection string and the embedding generator. So we have the abstract part, and if we look at this, this is the Microsoft extension vector data, while this one is, if we jump into it, we'll see that it's a Microsoft semantic kernel implementation of that vector store. Of course, this is just SQLite, but if you want to have an Azure AI search, you do something very similar, but you just new up an Azure AI vector store with a search index and some credentials, but still get back a vector store. If you want a SQL server, you do the same with a connection string, and if you want a Cosmos DB, you do more or less the same as well. So the vector store is the abstract part, and these are the implementations. But again, we can see we are in a Microsoft Semantic Kernel connectors data. And when we just delete and create again, just so you shouldn't really delete every single time, of course, but just go in and upsert our data into a vector record here. Again, I have different dedicated videos about exactly what every single little part of this is, because we have covered it multiple times before. But the big main part here is this package is now deprecated. So we need to get rid of that and switch over to the new system. And you might think, oh no, we need to do a migration. Well, that migration is pretty easy, because what we can do is just go to here and say, I don't want this anymore. We delete it. We go to Community Toolkit. Spell. vector data. And there we have the new packages. They are in a version 1.0. The previous was actually in preview, but now they have moved up. You can see that all of them, but the vector SQLite is in preview. It's not in preview, but we can take this one, install it. So instead of the Microsoft Semantic Kernel Connectors SQLite Vec, we now have Community Toolkit Vector Data.SQLite. So just a new namespace here. And if we look at our code, of course, it complains that semantic kernel doesn't exist here. But we can just go in and take this using and turn it into community toolkit.vectordata.SQLvector. And the rest is up and running completely as before. So it is only a move of the data, nothing more, to a different namespace. Everything else is exactly the same, down to the search, the collection, everything. It's just a move of the data to a different namespace. So the migration is very, very easy. Find your usings and switch to the new NuGet package, and then you are up and running again. So that's actually everything for this video. See you in the next one.